If you've moved to a foreign country and you still speak only English in the foreign country, you are missing out on most of the life's opportunities in terms of your social life, personal life, in terms of dating, in terms of making friends, connecting with people. You are kind of living in the bubble.
日本어떤 식으로 지금 적용되는 건가요? 国外的男生对中国的女生有什么样的刻板印象？他就是觉得他不会找更漂亮的，或者更好的，或者性格更好的。
Я вообще начинал свой канал с интервью на китайском языке. 3時前には着陸できません。
These days, more and more people are moving out of US. New tax changes in the US, especially capital gains tax, mean that many businesses would pay about 40% of taxes. Guess what? Like, actually, many businesses have already moved out of the United States because of the same reason, because people don't want to depend on one government. Many people who can do that, they will do that. Many people who can have a few foreign passports, who can live in a few countries without being dependent on one government, have already done so. And many more people are thinking about doing so. Not only people who are running businesses and have the opportunity to live in other countries, but also actually, according to recent news, more than half of Gen Z young people want to move out of the US. And of course, those people who move to another country, they will be moving out of the English-speaking country to a non-English-speaking country. They will not be moving to another English-speaking country because it would mean just the same thing, like same taxes, same environment, and basically they wouldn't reap the benefits. They won't get the same benefits that they're looking for in terms of taxes and some new life and social opportunities and stuff like this. So normally we're talking about foreign countries who don't speak English. Crazy statistics about Korea, like I've mentioned before, is like 70% of expats in Korea don't speak Korean. The same holds true for other countries. Like in Latin America, same. Like most expats don't speak Spanish. Most expats don't speak the language of the country that they live in. Same goes for China. People live in China for like 5 years without learning more than a few basic sentences. And to me, it actually, to be honest, it sounds crazy when somebody says, oh, Victor learned Chinese because he lived in China for 3 years and he lived in Korea for 4 years. That's why he speaks all those languages. Well, actually, it's the opposite. I learned those languages and that's why I was able to live in those countries. And I learned the language before I go to the country. And many people, they're chasing their financial goals, business goals. They're able to afford a few passports to move their business and everything to another country. But all of a sudden, they find themselves in their English-speaking bubble, which is absolutely crazy. Because if you think about it, you kind of limit yourself to like 10% of the people of the whole country. Let's say you're attracted to some person, you can talk to them. Be it like personal life-wise or like friendship-wise, in terms of friendships, in terms of personal life. If you're attracted to somebody, you're really limited. And even if they do speak English, once you have a conversation with them and they start having conversation with another person, you just stand there completely clueless about what's going on. Like, you're completely clueless. You don't know what they talk about with that person. You kind of feel like an outsider. If you're living in a foreign country, be it Malaysia, for example, if you moved from the United States to Malaysia, and if you don't speak any, like, the most popular language in Malaysia, you're missing out on so many things. Same goes for Korea. Let me actually Google what languages those people speak. So Malaysia, main languages. I know that it's a very international country. So the national language is Malay, right? 80% of people speak this language. So if you don't speak Malay in Malaysia, if you speak only English, you'll limit yourself to the rest 20%, I guess, or something. I don't know. But not to 20% of people of that country, but you will be limiting your social life and your personal life like crazy. So it's like you will not experience like moving abroad. What actually should happen and what actually happens, let's talk about it. So if you're moving from the US to Malaysia or to any like Spanish-speaking country or to China or to Korea or Japan, what should happen? So first of all, you should learn the language in that country, or before moving to that country, you should be kind of reborn, sort of speaking, right? If you live in that country, if you speak the language, you start speaking the language, and years go by, months go by, and your brain actually improves because you start speaking a foreign language. Who knows, maybe you'll learn another language after that. You shouldn't limit yourself. I personally speak 5 languages. I was never limiting myself by the language that I speak, by just one foreign language, or just the language of my country. I'm from Russia. You might hear the accent. But again, it's like, if you move to Malaysia and you speak only English there, yes, you achieved your goals in terms of tax benefits, in terms of being independent from the country of the government of just one country. But are you really free? You might be business free, or you might be geographically free, but you're not free in terms of your social life. You'll be always hitting those walls. To be honest, I can't really imagine how just basically how can you really set such a low standard for yourself if you really move to a country, live there for a long time? How can you set such a low standard not to learn the language of the country you move to? You should really think about it. What is really stopping you? Is it some kind of limiting belief? You think you're too old to learn the language, which is complete bullshit. Because I mean, I had a client, he's 60 plus. He's like 62 years old, and he was learning Chinese faster and speaking Chinese better than 20-year-olds on my program. So it shouldn't be the age, it shouldn't be your time, because it's like 30 minutes to an hour a day, which is enough. You would be spending that time watching Netflix or like just doing something else anyway, because you're not working 18 hours a day, I suppose, but 18 hours a day, right? So and so basically this is, you would still have those 30 minutes a day, and the age doesn't matter, right? And so what is actually stopping you? If you move to Malaysia, or if you move to China, you don't speak the language of that country, you don't start speaking this language at least after like 3 to 6 months, what is stopping you? To me, that's really crazy, to be honest. I can't personally relate to that, because I think that's a mistake that you can fix. I had clients on my program, they lived in China for 5 years, and they learned Chinese after they left China. They realized their mistake after they left the country, and they were able to fix it. You are the owner of your destiny. You decide who you become. You decide what the future image of yourself is, right? So first of all, setting this kind of very low standard for yourself, that once you move to the country, you speak only English and live in this English speaking bubble. I think it's a very low standard. I think it's a very low standard if you go to a country, non-English speaking country, and you don't learn the language while spending 1/3 of the year there, or most of the year there, or like the whole year there. If you live in one country, in another country, if you live in different foreign countries, some people live like 4 months in one country, 4 months in another country. If you don't speak the language of those countries, it's to me, it's like being uneducated. It really doesn't matter how many. Imagine, like, it really doesn't matter how much money you made and how successful you are. There will always be somebody more successful, and it's like a never-ending game, right? Everybody kind of knows that. Who's in this thing for a long time. But how can you really distinguish yourself from those people that you're together working with, and who, like, from your business partners, from your friends who are doing business? How can you really distinguish yourself in terms of your social life? How can you create a better social life for yourself? Learn the language. This is the most important thing. And the bad news is that most advice online that I personally saw, it comes from people who learn just one foreign language and they spend like the whole life on that. Basically, they started learning the language like 10 years ago. They became native, like even like fluent in this language after 10 years. And then if somebody asks them, how did you learn the language? Can you give me an advice? They do give an advice, but they give advice like, oh, you can translate every word in a dictionary, or something like you can watch anime, or you can use Anki cards, or you can use like some apps. So in my mind, I'm like, well, actually, you know what? First of all, I don't want to wait for 10 years to become fluent in a language, or conversational in a language, like get intermediate level. Secondly, I don't want to learn from a person who spent 10 years on learning just one language. Because here's the reason why. Because in a 10-year time frame, in the 5 to 10 years time frame, everything works. Everything works. You can be watching a movie and translating every word from subtitles, and this is how you can learn the language. You can do anything. You can translate dictionaries. You can translate books. You can do anything you want. But in 10 years, it's possible to learn the language using pretty much any method. But I want to speak the language, and the goal basically the thing that I'm doing is that I help people to start speaking languages faster, right? And I don't want to, in months, I don't want to waste years on that. At most, it should be like 1 to 2 years. Of course, I always say fluency takes years, but you can become conversational in 3 to 6 months. Of course, it takes years of immersion, of living in the country. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, hey, there is a magic pill, you can just take it. And no, it requires work, right? It requires a lot of work. You need to study every day. But again, if you are taking advice from people who learned only one foreign language and they spend like 10 years on that, I mean, everything would work. You don't have to take any advice from anybody, because if you spend 10 years to master a skill, I mean, everything will work. So the goal is to make it faster. If you move to a foreign country, and if you actually set the standard for yourself high enough, so that you realize that not speaking a language of that country makes you uneducated, no matter how rich you are and how successful you are in your field. If you want to get educated, the best thing is to learn the language. This is the first thing. And secondly, stop listening to people who spent 10 years on learning just one language. So the goal is not to spend years on it's not to waste years on learning just one foreign language, right? So level one is, I would say, level 0. If level 0 is when you don't even learn the language, your standard is so low. Some people's standard is so low, they'll be living in the country for years, like in Malaysia, in Spain, in Portugal, for years, without getting their life figured out, getting their social and personal life figured out, without learning a language, right, of that country that they live in. This is like a 0 level, right? Level 1 is when you start learning from those people who spent 20 years on learning one language and recommend you some Duolingo app, which makes you connect the picture with a word, and you learn like 3 words a day, and at the end of the year you learn 0 words. So this is another thing, right? So this is level 1, I say. Why is it level 1? Is because at least you're doing something. At least you are starting out. Because when you start out, I mean, you can be starting out with a video course, with an app, but it doesn't mean that you'll proceed with that, right? So sometimes people just want to get stress-free introduction to the language, which is okay. This is what I did back in the days with Japanese and Chinese, and I was like, okay, so let me check it out. Like, what is the language all about, right? Like, what does it have alphabet, or how do you learn characters? So I was just kind of curious. I was checking out a lot of like YouTube channels and apps and video courses. But then once you realize that those things really don't move you far, you need to move to level 2, right? Level 2 is when you realize that in order to become conversational, fluent in the language over the course of the year, like in 3 months, 6 months, it's impossible, close to impossible to become fluent in 3 to 6 months. But I mean, conversational, you can talk to people for like hours, you can live in the language in 6 months from now. It's possible, right? So this is what I personally saw clients on my program are doing. This is what I saw people doing using the right methods, right principles, right? So once you realize that you want to be on the level 2, you need to realize that you need to get enough of information input, enough of guidance. Like, for example, information input, it should be series of textbooks. Why am I against apps and like video courses? Because it's not the format. It's because they don't have enough information. It's not the format, oh, it's an app or it's a video course. No, it could be a great app. It could be a great video course. But again, they just don't contain enough information. Normally, it's like 3 to 4 textbooks that you need to finish. to become, depending on the language. If it's Korean or Chinese, those are very complex languages. More textbooks should be finished to become conversational fluent, right? If it's like Spanish, you can finish just or two textbooks and you can start talking to people, right? So I know people who finish like 2 textbooks and they have hours of conversations already, so in Spanish. So yeah, again, it's like, it depends on the language, but you should finish a certain number of textbooks, for example. You should get pronunciation feedback. You should be guided by a professional. So this is level number 2, when you realize that, oh, I probably shouldn't be my own dentist, or I shouldn't be my own doctor. If I can't swim, I shouldn't learn swimming by myself. I should learn from experts who already did it multiple times, not just like once on one foreign language. Like some American became fluent in Japanese and he's been learning for the last 15 years and he gives you advice on how to learn it and just says that here's an app that can help you, like, and you realize that the app just sponsored them, right? So this is not how it works, right? So normally, again, like I said, short period of time, you should choose like a 6-month time frame, and you should devote time to learning. And many people are busy, right? So we work somewhere, or we run our business, we have our personal life, social life, and then learning a language, it becomes some skill that we just postpone all the time. So many people just postpone it, like next year, next month, and the next year, next month, the same thing happens. They just keep postponing it. And then like some issues happening, in business issues, personal life issues, and then it just gets postponed forever. But guess what? Like on one day, on one occasion, you'll see somebody just like you with your problems, with your level of success, as successful as you, as good as you, looking the same, like same problems, same life situation, absolutely the same situation, but they'll be speaking fluent Malay or Spanish or Chinese or Korean, and in spite of those problems and those excuses, in spite of them, right? While you will be postponing forever, right? So if you don't want to turn out like this, the best way is to start going to level number 2. So level number 0 is basically living in the country, having low standard for your education and just not speaking the language, right? Not learning the language of that country. Level number 1 is realizing that you need to learn, but you don't want to just you want to take things slow, but some people take things slow for their whole life. So level 1 is also not good. Because it doesn't really give you any, even beginner level in the language. You cannot achieve beginner level. People think, people say, I'm just a beginner in the language. Oftentimes you see some fake polyglots like speaking supposedly 20 languages, and then you see it's just like a couple phrases. And they say they're beginners. Actually, beginner is a very high level. Beginner level is at least you should finish 1 or 2 textbooks to become a beginner in the language. Beginner level is when you can have a 20-minute conversation in the language. This is a beginner level. And people who call themselves beginner in 20 languages, I really doubt that in many cases. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that you need to set the standard for yourself high enough so that you, first of all, don't waste years. Second of all, you learn the language. Don't waste years. Don't waste hours on ineffective apps. If something, they really demotivate you, right? So, and the most important thing is when you go really from level 0 to at least level 2, right? So this is the most important thing. So once you learn the language, once you start learning the language using the right methods, once you move to level 2, you'll start noticing that most people around you, they don't do that. And it's like you climb up the mountain, and the more you climb up the mountain, the more you can see what is below the mountain. The more buildings and trees and parks and rivers and lakes you can see below you. So the same happens with language. The more you start learning the language, the more you'll realize how ignorant people are, because you will join like top 20 or 30% of experts who actually take time to become conversational and fluent in the language. And you will realize, and what you'll notice is that the doors will start opening. First of all, if you come in and buy things in the language of the country, people react differently. You already saw a lot of videos of me speaking different languages. Same would happen if I would speak Spanish in a Spanish-speaking country. People would react differently in comparison to the person who would speak only English. So this is the first thing. nor you will experience better quality of life, better quality of relationships, because you will be having more choice in life. Because if you choose only among people who speak only English, I mean, this is, first of all, you can be speaking English to them, but the connection will not be the same. If somebody speaks their language to them and you're speaking English to them, the level of connection will not be the same. You'll have a better quality of your relationship partners, business partners even, and it's just the overall social life will be completely transformed. The next thing is that you will feel like you're more free. Because living in a foreign country, you always need to translate things, right? So you need to either ask somebody to help you, or you can't even take calls in those languages. To be honest, I can't even imagine how people live in a foreign country move from the US to a foreign country without learning the language. I can't imagine how they survive. Because first of all, you can't understand anything. Like, you can't take calls. You can't approach people and ask them something in the language. You can't make friends. How can you even live there? Like, every single time you should ask people whether they speak English or not. And this is your go-to. And this is just like, to me, is like, well, I'm uneducated, so do you speak English? Like, so basically, you're showing that you're uneducated. And this is actually really the worst mistake people can make. Why do you need to start as soon as possible to learn this language? The best way to learn a foreign language of the country you're moving to or living in was 1 year ago, actually, right? The second best time is now, because years go by and you will hit a downward spiral. Because you will realize that, oh, it's been already a few years or a few months in this country, I didn't start learning, so it's kind of late, I'm so busy, and you will keep postponing that forever. People don't postpone for the next year. People never postpone for the next month. They always postpone forever, always. I've never seen a person postponing learning a foreign language and actually learning it. Never. If you say that next year I will start learning this language, you will never start. Like, to me, it's like, I will never start learning this language. You better be honest with yourself and say, hey, I will never learn any language, rather than saying that you will learn the language at some point in time in the future. So it's better to say that you will never learn the language. So this is kind of funny, but it's actually true. And the worst thing that people experience when living abroad, I did a live stream yesterday and I said, that actually the biggest stress component of expats in Korea, specifically, guess what? Like, Korea is not unique. Other countries is the same. It's the same for other countries. The biggest stress component is inability to speak Korean. That's the biggest stress component. Another crazy fact, foreigners in Korea responded that the biggest reason why they get discriminated against was not the skin color, not nationality, not the country they're coming from. It was the inability to speak Korean. To be honest, first of all, I don't even understand why would you call a bad attitude from this country's people to somebody who doesn't speak their language as a discrimination. I don't understand that. If you come to Korea and you don't speak Korean and you expect people to speak English and they give you bad attitude for that, you call it discrimination. I really don't understand that. I don't think it's discrimination. And if it's a discrimination, well, I mean, I'm on the side of the people who discriminate, because I don't understand how can you come to a country, live for a long time without giving a respect to its culture and language, because you cannot learn the culture without language. You cannot learn the language without the culture. So those are interrelated things. And for somebody, this podcast will be a big wake-up call, huge wake-up call, because like I said, most people, 70 or 80% of people from the US moving to Spanish-speaking countries, Chinese-speaking countries, moving to Korea, Japan, they don't learn the language. They don't learn the language. And they will always say, oh, this country is this or that, or like they discriminate against me. Did you take time to learn the language? Why would you go to the country without learning the language, right? And the craziest thing is that some people don't even realize how limited their bubble is. So they're living in an English-speaking bubble, and it's just it's like the only choice that they have is just talk to people who speak English, right? In dating life, if you see a person you're attracted to, you go to a cafe, you want to talk to a person you're attracted to, right? You want to talk to a girl or a guy that you're attracted to. The first phrase you would say, do you speak English? It's like, why? Like I would impress them with my language skills. I would impress them that I try to learn the language. I would impress them that I'm smart and educated, right? I wouldn't impress them with the car that I was driving to that cafe. I would like to impress them with me, not with things, not with a Gucci bag, not with the expensive car, with me, with my personality. Would you like to impress people with things or with you? This is the question. Would you like people to look at things or at your face? If you drive a car, people look at a car. If you speak a language, people look at your face. If you have a Gucci bag, people look at the Gucci bag. If you speak a language, people look at your face, right? So how do you distinguish yourself from other people just like you moving to that country? How do you have a social life? How do you build up relationships with people? If you go to China, if you go to any big city, and if you want to build a social life from scratch, you will be 99.9% of opportunities for you will always be limited in dating and social life. Almost all opportunities will be just cut off if you don't speak the language. But here's the good news. I was talking only about bad news during this whole time. I was kind of ranting how bad it is not to learn the language, and it's like such a waste of lifetime, to be honest, not to learn the language. It's a really low standard. Like people who speak only English and who have foreigners around them, and to me, it's a real low standard. It's actually true. Like even if you stay in the US for your whole life and you have a lot of Spanish-speaking friends and a lot of Chinese friends or friends from other countries and you don't speak their language, to me, it's like it really doesn't matter how successful you are. I can't relate to that, and it's nothing wrong. Don't get me wrong. It's just like, to me, it's like people don't realize their life potential. It's really sad, and success is measured not only in terms of numbers, not only in terms of on how much you earn and what car you drive, but it also measured on how much people like you and how good of a social life you have, right? So if you live in if you live in international communities and you don't learn the language, to me, it's just it's a really sad story. So, but the good news is that if you move to that country and if you start speaking the language, you might become a completely different person in a few years from now. Imagine you going from completely not speaking the language and then speaking the language and making friends in this language, and people laugh and smile and like you more and ask you how do you learn the language. Well, this is where it happens. You're like a superstar in a good way. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about like ego or like something like this. I'm talking about the actually people liking your personality. Your personality starts shining. You start expressing yourself. Imagine yourself joking in another language. Right? Imagine yourself joking in Malay, in Chinese, in Korean, in Spanish, just throwing jokes to people here and there. Imagine yourself doing that, and people will be just staring and smiling, and you would make friends, and you'll be just like, you'll be having this halo effect. Again, not from your wallet, but from your personality, not from your car or bag or anything else superficial, but from your personality, right? So it's a different type of attraction. It's a different type of attention that you will get, completely different, right? So most expats don't do that. Even after moving abroad, they have to stay in an English-speaking bubble, like I said. And being geographically independent doesn't mean that you're socially independent. You can move to other countries, you can live in other countries, and you can get passport, residence permit, long-term visa, and so on and so forth. But socially, you'll be half isolated. And this is the worst thing. You have a chance. If you move to that country, you have a huge advantage of staying in that language-speaking environment that most people don't have. And if you take time, 30 minutes a day to learn this language, to actually from level 2, move to level 2, like I said, and become conversational, start speaking and joking with people in this language, in 6 months from now, spending only 30 to 60 minutes a day on studying, well, your life will completely change. You'll have a lot of interesting stories that you'll share with me, and you'll have a lot of completely crazy stories. Your life will be like a movie, Believe me, I'm talking, this podcast is not the only format I'm doing, right? So you can check out my videos. After 1 minute, I enter somewhere, people smile, people laugh, people look at me, people ask me where I'm from. And it doesn't come from me, again, driving an expensive car or having a lot of money in the bank account. It comes from my personality and my skill level. This is completely different. It's a different proposition, different value proposition, right? So there is a financial, materialistic value proposition. The competition is crazy. No matter how good you are, there will always be somebody better than you. You already know that. Any entrepreneur meeting you go to, there is somebody smarter and more successful than you. It's a never-ending game. But if you speak like a few languages, people will be just looking at you on a completely different level. If you speak at least one foreign language, you learn it and you'll realize that your brain is limitless. No matter how old you are and like how many excuses you have, you're limitless. Believe me, it really depends on you. The brain is flexible. Somebody asked me, like, who's doing business, some entrepreneur asked me, like, how did you learn all those languages? Are you naturally good at them? I'm like, how did you do business? How did you become successful in doing business? It was like, well, I was just like, is there any secret? Well, you just do the right thing and you just do it more and more. The same with languages. You commit to it and you do the right thing. Don't use apps and don't listen to bullshit advice from people promoting some apps and some Duolingo, some stuff like this. So hope that helps. And this is a really honest, non-filtered type of advice. Many people will get triggered from that. I understand that. But I'm really apologetic. I'm from Russia. I really say what I think. And I think that there is really no excuse not to learn the language of the country that you stay in. I think being successful financially and in other areas or in fitness is not an excuse not to become successful in other areas, which basically like improving your brain, right? If you want to learn a musical instrument, you should invest time in it. If you want to learn swimming, you should invest time in it. If you want to learn how to speak foreign languages, you should invest time in it. But the good thing about foreign languages is that I don't know any skill on this planet that would impress people more and would make more connections, more smiles, more laughs, and happier life than speaking a foreign language. Speaking a foreign language is the best skill that you can get, no matter what your level is in business or in professional life. Speaking foreign language will leverage your personality, your charisma. And I hope that after listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, you will pick the language that you will learn, focus on this language for the next 6 months, and start having 30 to 60-minute conversations with people in half a year from now. It's life-changing, and I want you to do that.